Hey guys, Stucky here. If you ever wanted to try the best version of the Action Network app? Well, now is the perfect opportunity to do so because we have a special offer to celebrate the month of March and the NCAA tournament. You can get pro access for just $9.99 for the first month. That will give you access to things like Sean Kerner's player prop projections, which are invaluable, real-time money percentages, and our model's biggest edges, and much more. All you have to do is head over to actionnetwork.com/madness. That's actionnetwork.com/madness and get there before the deal expires. Cheers. We'll start with the America East today. This is a tournament that doesn't really reward the top seed format wise, other than the fact that they do get to host all the games, but it's a Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday format, and there are no buys, but they do reseed after each round. 8 of the top 9 make it. NJIT did not qualify. Interestingly enough, Vermont lost 1 league game all year, and it was to NJIT, who is not in this field.
And they beat the 2 seed Lowell too.
Yep. And NJIT beat the 2 seed. They had like a stretch of a giant killer stretch earlier in the season. Vermont is the heavy favorite here, -250. I think that's a little rich, but I'll get at Tanner's thoughts. And then you have Lowell close to 3-1, Bryant 8-1. Shop around as always. These can differ. I'm just taking one book. Then you're getting down to New Hampshire 35-1, Binghamton and Maine around 50-1, and UMBC 80-1. Thing that jumps out first, I mean, Vermont is clearly the best team in the league. They have their defense is outstanding, and when they played the 2 biggest threats on paper, Lowell and Bryant, they just, shut them down. And I think Lowell and Bryant are more comfortable playing faster, and Vermont just doesn't let them do that. And then they're out of their comfort zone. And that's one of the storylines, I think, going into this, is that you have a lot of contrast in style. So you want to think fast, Bryant, Albany, New Hampshire, UMBC, Lowell. All top 60 adjusted tempo. The top 4 are close to top 25. Lowell's a little like 50, 60. Slow. Vermont's a complete snail. Grinds the game down to a halt. They're not going to go after any offensive rebounds. They're going to get back. They're not going to let you get in transition. And they get every defensive rebound. They contest every shot. Their weaknesses, like their transition, is a bit vulnerable, but they don't let you get in transition. So I think that they could be zoned maybe to take away some of like their cutting action and everything they do on offense, but not many weaknesses, especially in this conference where they're not going to turn it over. They're going to get every defensive rebound. Their D is just great across the board. So Tanner, I'll start with you here. How good is this Vermont team relative to the rest of the league? And is that basically it, that like just Lowell and Bryant can't beat them because Vermont doesn't let them play their game?
Yeah, you pretty much nailed it, like most of what I'm going to say. And what I want to start with,
all right, thanks for coming. Randall, do you have any thoughts?
is the last decade or so of America East hoops has been defined more by like defense and shot selection, at least relative to many other low major leagues. More methodical pace, more fundamental defense, disciplined rebounding. But the injection of Bryant last year and then recent coaching changes at New Hampshire, Albany, and UMBC have flipped the league's composition on its head. Bryant runs a transition on steroids attack. Nathan Davis has turned New Hampshire into a track team. Dwayne Killings has quickly upped the Danes' pace of play, and he's recruited some of the most like dynamic, speedy players in America East history. Jim Ferry is a long way from Ryan Odom, and he really leaned into pace and shooting this year with a totally new look roster. And all of a sudden, the America East basketball has become about pushing the pace, letting it fly, and eschewing prevention in favor of all-out assault. Last year, the America East ranked 20th among 32 conferences in tempo. The 2 years before, 28th. The league was 31st in 2019. This year, the conference led the nation in pace, averaging a shade over 70 possessions per game. You said it stuck. 3 ranked top 10 nationally adjusted tempo, 3 teams, another top 25, another top 60. 4 AME squads averaged double-digit fast break points per game. 3 ranked top 10 nationally in transition frequency. My favorite example, an early February game between UMBC and Albany featured 37 transition possessions, 37 fast break points, 150 field goal attempts, 40 free throws, 50 threes, and 216 points, all in regulation. It has been a hell of a year, Stuck. A really fun, different year for America East basketball. I mean, they even changed the logo to like the ugliest looking logo I've ever seen in my life. Looks like a ripoff of the I-95 sign. But still, like the more things change, the more they stay the same. And Vermont won its 8th consecutive regular season title behind a 15-1 conference record. And before we get into why, Bet365 dropped a ridiculous, like ludicrous,
They're
hilarious.
like even money, right?
Yeah, a plus 100. I saw that. I obliterated it. Got a steal of a price. I think I make the fair price about minus 150. I think they win it 60% of the time. And unfortunately for everyone who doesn't follow us on Twitter and the Action Network app, that number got obliterated, like you said, minus 270. And we'll talk about some other teams and other angles that might have better value than that. But for all intents and purposes, I'm picking Vermont to cut down the nets because John Becker stood pat in the face of change. Vermont refuses to be sped up. They still run their methodical 5-out motion offense that totally ignores offensive rebounds in favor of getting back on defense. And Becker talked about
they're like 350th in proximity, near proximity too. They're not a rim-based offense, and that part of that is they don't get offensive rebounds.
Yeah, perimeter-oriented offense, take a lot of threes. And Becker talked about his transition defensive mentality on a podcast a couple years ago, and basically the Cats gun towards the hole and then fan out to shooters, even as more teams have started taking more threes in transition. And really, it's been dynamite. I mean, they've been a good transition defense since Becker took over. I mean, I know they're a little bit vulnerable in terms of per possession, but they're so good in denial. And so even as every other America East team started sprinting towards Vermont, Becker upped the ante, doubled down on his style, and it actually worked in their favor because none of these ultra transition reliant teams could generate transition offense against the America East Kings, stifling everyone's offensive identity at the outset. The league ran right into Becker's hands, and the Cats led the nation in fast break points per game allowed, under 6. They're above the 70th percentile in transition points per possession allowed, under 1. They've allowed double-digit fast break points in only 3 conference games this year, while allowing 5 or fewer 6 times and 0 4 times. And that partially resulted in John Becker's best defensive team ever. They're top 60 in defensive efficiency nationally, led the America East in effective field goal percentage allowed, 2-point shooting allowed, points per game allowed. They rebounded everything, never fouled. At the point of attack, Shamir Bogues is the best defensive point guard that Vermont has ever had. As the anchor, Aleri Aofalayi, is a defensive player of the year. Astonishing to watch him play defense. More impactful games, more impactful plays with each passing game. He had 4 blocks for Vermont.
Huge blocks, like huge game-changing blocks.
He's amazing. 4 in that title clinching game against Lowell. Their defense is 12 points per 100 possessions better with him on the court. Their rim defense is 8 percentage points better. He's a stud in the post, defends at all 3 levels, among the most versatile athletic players I've ever seen. Even offensively, he's become really good. And the big thing for him is he developed a 3-point shot, only like 14 for 46 on the year, 30%. That's not great or high volume, but it's been important because defenses have to somewhat respect that now, meaning he can stay on the court longer in Becker's 5-out motion because coach doesn't have to sacrifice spacing for defense. So with that, let's talk about the offense a little bit more. I was wary about this group of guards' ability to cut and shoot as effectively as last year's. And at their best, they're every bit as good as last year's squad. They can still shoot the rock, not quite as well as they did, but it's fine. And their secondary options, which is running ball screens to hit roll men who either hard roll or hit cutters off of that on the short roll, generated highly efficient offense. I mean, Vermont led the league in 2-point shooting for a reason, 55%. But they are prone to long droughts and stale offense, and their metrics are down. 3 times this year, they scored less than 25 first half points, just couldn't, just got stale, couldn't get shots, couldn't make shots. However, the difference maker is that this is also the deepest team that Becker has ever had. Top 50 nationally in bench minutes. He's never had a top 70 team in that. 9 players play 14 or more minutes. 8 have led the team in scoring at least once this year. And that's made a huge difference, really in 2 ways. One, it's given Vermont a huge advantage with the new league schedule. America East moved from a Wednesday, Saturday schedule to a Thursday, Saturday schedule. Legs are so much fresher on 48-hour turnarounds. And the Catamounts have taken off in the second half this year because they have more depth. They're top 30 nationally in second half scoring margin. they always have another guy they can lean on when someone else isn't scoring. You know, Aaron Deloney, a human microwave, Shamir Bogues, bully ball, 20 point per game sometimes. Matt Veretto has legit NBA range as a stretch four. Jace Rockamore is a sneaky good dribble penetrator playmaker in that second unit. And TJ Long, a dream transfer on the wing, shooting 36% from three, hitting all sorts of big shots this year. That depth combined with their defense should be more than enough to overcome any obstacles on their way to the big dance. It's exactly how they managed to beat top opponents Lowell and Bryant on the road in less than 48 hours in late January, despite playing an overtime period in the first game. It's exactly how they're able to dominate Lowell despite not having Veretto and TJ Hurley in the title clinching game. And it's exactly how they're going to win their third consecutive America East title.
Yeah, Fiorello didn't play in that game either, or did he play? He missed. Will Vermont be fully healthy?
So I believe it was just Veretto and Hurley who were out.
Fiorello missed the finale.
Okay, yeah. No, they rested most of their guys. Becker confirmed that both Veretto and Hurley will be back. I assume Fiorello.
Which is kind of telling that you might look at that final score against Lowell and say they only won by 12. They were up close to 30 without two starters.
Yeah, they dominated.
It was 62-36 with 12
and
to
then
go in the second half, which shows you Vermont was playing its game and Lowell couldn't score.
Yeah, and then they went and they beat New Hampshire by 4 on the road with nothing to play for, missing 4 of their top 6 guys. I mean, they played Jackson Skipper for like however many minutes. I haven't seen him all year.
Yeah, well, let me ask you this before we get to some of the other teams in the league that could potentially make noise. Because, yeah, I agree with you. Vermont, their offense can get stagnant. They're not an elite shooting team. They shoot a ton of threes, right? They're 350th in proximity. And they don't get to the line, and they don't get offensive rebounds. So when they're going through droughts, when they're not making shots, then there's just no other recourse, right, for them. Now their defense is going to keep them in the game. But assuming that they do win this tournament, before we get to some of the other teams, does this team have a prayer? And what would be like the type of team that they would have to play? Because they couldn't get. They're not going to be able to. Obviously, they play slow and they shoot a ton of threes, like on the surface. And they're well coached. It's like profiles as okay, maybe this team could pull off an upset, but they're definitely going to be a big athletic disadvantage. But what type of team would you want for them to play to potentially back them in a good spot, and if they make the dance?
Likely on an up-tempo transition-heavy team, like I talked about, but one that isn't really good in the pick and roll. Like Marquette cooked them last year because their ball screen coverage defense is a little shaky here and there. On the other, maybe another like high shooting team, like maybe like a Kentucky, where high variance could get into effect and they can start making all their shots while the other team misses it. Perhaps a team that can't stop roll men. I think that's the big key, because when Vermont isn't making shots, that's what they do. They shapeshift into ball screen mode and then try to hit Veretto and Fiorello off that hard roll or short roll. And that's how they generate interior secondary offense. So I don't know, some kind of team that can really stop that, defend the 3-point line well, and like slow the game down. That's what really scares me. But if you get like an up-tempo hot shooting team that plays somewhat okay, not great interior defense, sounds like a pretty good matchup to me.
Like Arkansas a couple years ago, they were right there. But yeah, last year was a pretty bad matchup against Marquette. But let's go to the rest of the league. And, when I look at UMass Lowell, they are the 2 seed. They will start with UMBC. For what it's worth, 2 teams that want to run and play fast. They're both at meetings 86-82, 93-80. Lowell wants to get to the rim at all costs. 15th in near proximity attempt rate. And that should play against the Retrievers, who give up a ton at the rim. Those games should be super high scoring. UMass Lowell, I think, around plus 300, as I mentioned. Bryant plus 800. They are elite in transition. They're 98th percentile in transition frequency, 88th percentile in efficiency, but their half-court offense, not that great. Lots of isolation. They want to get to the rim, but they get no offensive rebounds. Their defense is pretty good, especially at the rim, but they do allow a ton there. So those are I think the 2 favorites. Then you have like the kind of the second tier, which is New Hampshire, Binghamton, and Maine. And there's also some injuries to note here. Earl Timberlake, potentially, he didn't play in the finale. Rumors swirling, right, that he might miss a game, might miss the tournament. I don't know if you have more on that. And then Torrance for Binghamton, he's questionable too. Per Evan Mia, he's their best player. He
Max
didn't play in
Brooks
the
for
final
Lowell.
too. Max Brooks for Lowell too. So start in the 2-3 and then work your way down. But the 2-3, I think we just talked about it. I don't think there's any value there because like they just can't. I don't think that they can beat Vermont. Like I think the team that could potentially upset Vermont is a team that's more comfortable playing slow in a grinder, right? And then you hope Vermont has an off shooting night, and then maybe another path is if you get Io in foul trouble, right? That's something else that could work in their favor. But I think it's one of these teams, like a Binghamton and a Maine are very comfortable in slower games and aren't trying to push the pace. It doesn't matter that Vermont's going to keep them out of transition and slow the game down. So if I'm looking for a longer shot, I would personally either look at Binghamton or Maine. What say you?
Yeah, for my longer shot flyer, I thought about UMBC, Binghamton, or Maine. I settled on Maine 50-1, partially because of the Symir Torrance injury. And Coach Sanders had a really strange, vague post-game press conference about his status, which does not give me much confidence. Partially because I don't trust UMBC to get any stops, even though the retrievers are really interesting because they've played the top of the league really tough. And there's some injury concerns surrounding Lowell's Max Brooks. And finally, because our action internal metrics, the analytics give Maine a 7% chance of winning the whole thing. That's a fair price closer to plus 1,300 and the fourth best odds in the conference. That's huge value. And before I even learned that, Maine was my long shot America East flyer, and here's why. They were so disappointing this year. All the preseason hype I had for them, the Black Bears and I, we just fell right on our face. Unfortunately, I think that Chris Markwood and company showed they weren't quite ready to contend from a mental standpoint. They flailed on a lot of crunch time situations. Blew a second half lead against Vermont, blew an 11-point lead with 6 minutes left at home against New Hampshire, blew late leads to UMBC, New Hampshire, Binghamton, blew a late lead to Albany, but managed to scrape by an OT. 8 of their 9 losses came by combined 28 points. That's 3.5 per game. 3 came by 1 possession. But as you always talk about on this lovely podcast, close game variance usually turns around. And I thought the Bears could have been a little unlucky, could be a little undervalued. And that luck did somewhat turn down the stretch. They pulled off a second half comeback against Bryant, held off UMBC and NJIT late. And they did win that overtime game against Albany. They survived a 10-point second half melt in the regular season finale against Lowell, pulled out a huge win. Look, the defense is still elite. It fully lived up to expectations. It's a really aggressive perimeter-based defense. They leveraged the dominant defensive backcourt of Tynes and Jaden Clayton to pressure ball handlers, jump passing lanes, and force turnovers. Second in the conference in defensive efficiency, forced the highest turnover rate again. Lethal ball screen coverage defense, which is obvious when you have Kellen Tynes at the point of attack. Denied cutters effectively in the gaps. Second to Vermont in fast break points per game allowed. They were second to Vermont in second chance points per game allowed. They cleaned the boards well. And while you think they were lucky after holding conference opponents to 29% from 3, Shot Quality projects them as a 30% 3-point defense because they were tops in the league in open 3 rate allowed and 3-point rate allowed. They allowed no threes to start, and they closed out on every one that they did allow. The problem is, as it always is in Orono, they cannot score. They can't score. They can't
All
shoot.
they do is they just take bad mid-range jumpers.
Yeah. And, it's not even as much that they can't generate offense as they consistently got away from what works. And Markwood was a little poor at scheming offense around his best guys. And what works well there is Tynes running ball screens with Peter Filipovich and Christian Firebergs. They're 2 Eastern European big men. Markwood runs a continuity ball screen offense, empty ball screen on the right, empty ball screen on the left, repeat, rinse and repeat. When Tynes either got a lane or got the ball to his front court, things worked. Tynes improved as a ball screen initiator this season. Filipovich was among the most versatile interior scorers in the conference. He's an elite bagman, array of moves. He can even run the pick and roll himself. And, that created some fun Filipovic Fireberg sets, and Fireberg is an elite roll man in his own right. But the ball somehow got into Keon Bird's and AJ Lopez's hands way too much on the wing. I mean, it was constant, and those are two below average younger wings that were sloppy with the ball and decision making, not great shooters. And defense has probably realized this and schemed against the big man to force the ball to the wind. That's an easy scout, right? But Mark Wood is a great coach who should be able to counter stuff like this, get his players open on the low block. All that said, Maine
Does
is
anyone
one.
on the team shoot over 30% from three? I don't even think anyone.
Jashante Wright McLeish had a good year shooting the ball.
That's got to be it. They're one of the worst shooting teams in the country.
That was really, really bad.
And
But
they don't get any offensive rebounds, which is another problem. So like they just go through such droughts. I agree. Their defense is so good. They force turnovers. Their perimeter D is great. Little weak in the post. That's kind of just by design. But like if you go up against Vermont, like Vermont's not going to turn it over, granted. But they could get. They're going to be. If they play Vermont, Vermont has a little bit of an off shooting night. They're going to be right there in the game and just a grinder, which is why I would fancy their chances, especially given the odds over a Lowell or a Bryant, who's just going to be so uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, part of the reason why I'm taking him is if Maine can pull off that upset over Bryant, which they've already done this year by holding the Bulldogs. Yeah, they held the Bulldogs transition reliant offense to 7 fast break points for 16 turnovers. And like you mentioned, I mean, I'm hearing rumors that potential player of the year candidate Earl Timberlake has been ruled out for the remainder of the year with a hand injury. Could be monster news. But if they get past them, I'm more than happy to take my chances against Vermont, given, Maine held a second half lead at Patrick in the first meeting. And the Bears match up pretty well. They're an excellent perimeter defense that can counter the 5-out, an even better ball screen and cutting defense that can counter Vermont's bailout options. And Vermont's ball screen coverage defense is merely okay. So, the ball screen continuity could work. And it's not like Vermont obliterated Maine in either battle. They averaged 0.95 points per possession across the two games. The defense kept it close. And Maine isn't, like you said, they're not transition reliant like any of these other teams. They actually want to slow the game down, try to face them up in the lower possession half court script, which works against the Cats in a way while increasing the matchup's variance. Ultimately, the Bears would need to shoot better than like the 10 for 32 from three they shot across the two matchups. But I'll take my chances at this number. And I'm also just willing to keep buying Maine stock and getting upset when they disappoint.
Yeah, I agree. Maine was a team I had circled. The Torrance injury. I was basically just like, I don't trust Lowell or Bryant, and they have injury questions because I don't think that they can beat Vermont given what we've seen this year and the style clashes. And the other two slow teams that I think would be comfortable with how Vermont's going to dictate the game. We've seen that all year, are either Maine or Binghamton. Binghamton has injury questions with Torrance. I think it's Maine is the long shot, 50-1 or better here in the America East. Before we let you go, excellent stuff as always. Any first round matchups you're going to be looking at? I mean, potentially Maine against Bryant.
I'll give you one. This is my buy sell spot of the tournament. I'm buying Binghamton. Look, if Samir Torrance is playing now, what I'm hearing online is that he's day to day right now. Not sure, but I thought the Bearcats were undervalued before conference play kicked off. We're due for some two-way shooting regression. Well, after starting 0-5, they finished 7-4, posted their first winning conference season since 2009. They're playing just great basketball right now, and all the positive regression came in. We'll talk about that more in a second. I'm really selling New Hampshire. They were getting crazy lucky from three on defense throughout most of the year. Opponents were shooting like 28% from three, despite the Wildcats ranking last in the conference in both 3-point rate allowed and open three rate allowed. Just an endless amount of open jumpers. All that negative regression came at once. The Wildcats lost their final 4 regular season games because those 4 opponents canned 42 of 100 3-point attempts. And I was thrilled when that happened because the truth is this is a really bad defensive team all around. The interior defense
so small too.
Oh yeah, small ball lineups. The interior defense is horrendous. When you watch New Hampshire, you're going to want to watch Clarence Daniels. He had my vote for player of the year last season. 3-level scoring big man who hits the boards harder than anyone else. And he leads a versatile, dynamic pace and space offense along excellent complementary front court pieces like Jackson Baker and Trey Woodward. But while Daniels defends, his complementary pieces don't. Baker and Woodward are horrific interior defenders who get bullied constantly by opposing front courts. Hence why New Hampshire ranks sub 350th nationally against post-up and roll man sets. Wildcats allow over 36 paint points per game, second to last in the conference in 2-point shooting allowed. So this is a team that's bad at defending the perimeter and bad at defending the interior. And the former luck has finally crashed to earth, showing the Wildcats' true colors. And in this specific matchup, Binghamton is the nation's cut heaviest offense. They run an offense where it's Symir Torrance hits wing cutters constantly. Nobody does it more. Only 3 teams have a higher like rim rate. And that's going to work against the lackluster, not there New Hampshire defense. Guys to watch out for are like Taimu Chenery, who is scoring like 15 points per game on 62% interior shooting just by cutting and driving the lane and getting to the rim. And also Gavin Walsh, rookie surge late in the season, averaging 11 points per game over the last 5. Also another really good cutter to the rim. That sounds really, really nice against New Hampshire's lifeless defense. And these two split the regular season series, but New Hampshire scraped by the first matchup at home in overtime when Chenery was injured. And in the second matchup, Binghamton handled UNH by 13 without Torrance. But the reason why I'm looking at Torrance, like I feel like I need Torrance here to make this play viable. The win was played without Torrance, but Binghamton was only able to overcome 21 turnovers thanks to a 10 for 22 shooting night from 3. I'm unsure if like Armand Harriet and Dan Petcash can remain that hot. If Torrance is handling the rock, those turnovers issues are minimized. The wings will cut to the rim freely. Other wings could still make shots, and Binghamton will roll the regressing Wildcats.
Yeah, coming into the season, I was super high on UMass Lowell, but when Koulibaly went out, he was in and out. There were discipline issues and injury issues. I mean, I feel like they hit their high point when they were beating Arizona State, that 4th game of the year, and then fell apart. They've been way too inconsistent. Bryan has struggled down the stretch without Timberlake. They're out. So I agree with you. I co-sign. The only answer is Maine. We saw Vermont earlier in the year at their best and worst in the non-conference. We saw them give up a big lead to Liberty and then Bradley. They lost those games, but they also had a big comeback as well against Charleston. So John Becker, Death Taxes and John Becker here. The only way you're going to beat them, similar like a Virginia team, is you're going to have to beat them slowing them down. The only team I'd give a sort of a long shot to is UMBC, only because they're 11-5 on the road. And for some reason, they seem to play better on the road than they do at home. But playing Vermont is just not the matchup for them. So to me, you want to, besides Vermont, it's Maine or nothing.